Am I wrong for what I told my mother-in-law when she asked to be in the delivery room? My husband, male 33, and I, 30 female, are expecting a baby boy. We're barely catching up with preparation and getting everything ready. His mom invited us for dinner and said she has an important request to make. She brought her request up at the dinner table and blatantly said that she wanted to be in the delivery room with me when I give birth. I was taken aback by her request. I really thought it had to be something to do with the nursery or diaper brand. I said I was sorry, but only my mom and my husband will be there. She made a face, got quiet for a while, then brought it up again. Just kept pushing, saying she's as much as a grandmother as my mom and that she just wanted to be there for support and get the opportunity to see her grandbaby's first moments. My husband sided with her. I just stared at her and said, "It's all right. You can have the opportunity to be in the delivery room when it's your son who's giving birth." Everyone stopped eating and my mother-in-law left the table in an instant. My husband had me get up, although I wasn't finished with dinner, but he said we should leave. In the car, he lost it on me asking, "What brain cell made you think it was a good idea to tell his mom that?" I told him his mom kept pushing after I'd already given her an answer. Still, he said this was the most fucked up shit he heard me say. I replied that I was just frustrated and didn't mean to hurt her feelings and cause issues. He argued that if I don't want issues, then I should just stop making shit difficult and say yes to his mom's request. He then ranted about how it's his son too, then said if his mom isn't allowed in there, then he won't be there too. Now I don't really know if he really meant this or just said it in the heat of the moment, but it had me fuming. He's been ignoring me when I try to talk to him and act like I'm not in the room. I think I might have gone too far and created tension by responding inappropriately. So, am I the asshole? Oh my god, you poor baby. No one gets to tell you who gets to see you get all stitched up in there. No one, not even the baby daddy.
Story time about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. Well, at the end of summer, right before school started, this girl named Liv added me on Snapchat. And I had seen her all around school. She was very popular and a little bit stuck up. But I added her back and then I got a call on Snapchat from her. I answer very awkwardly and I'm like, "Hi." And then she was like, "Oh, I've seen you in a lot of this guy's pictures. Are you guys like best friends?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sort of." And she goes, "Have you ever thought about dating him?" It was just an extremely weird out of nowhere conversation. Anyway, so fast forward 2 weeks, I walk in the first day of school with my best friend Tommy, and Tommy and I have like every single class together. For some reason, Liv thought that we were friends and she would come and go as she pleased. Like Tommy and I would be standing at my locker, she would come over. Anyways, fast forward to chemistry. She walks in the class, winks at Tommy, like for part 2 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, we were in chemistry, she walks in and she winks at Tommy. And I look over real quick and I realize that her nails were vermilion. That's Tommy's favorite color. And by the way, like I said before, I did not know this girl at all. We had never hung out. She never talked to me before this. Not to mention, anytime that her and I talked, she would only talk about Tommy. Fast forward a couple days, we're in chemistry, and somehow she got her assigned seat next to me. And she was like, "Hey, do you want to study for the chemistry test together?" And I was kind of excited because I thought that I had a new best friend. So I said, yeah. Later on, she comes to my house. I never told her an address or anything like that, so I was very creeped out about how she knew my address. We studied for the test, and she goes, "Hey, do you want to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys tomorrow?" Well, tomorrow was the day that I was going out of town. So she goes, "Okay, maybe next week." After being out of town, I came back on a Saturday, and the next day I get a text from Tommy, like for part 3. Part 3 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, she asked me if I wanted to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys. I told her that I was going out of town. When I got back from out of town, the next day, I get a text from Tommy. He was flipping out on me. He said that I was talking shit about him to Liv. And apparently I said that I was happy that his mother died. And a bunch of other bullshit. Well, after that, Tommy cut me off, so I was lonely, and I started hanging out with Liv more, even though she said that terrible stuff to Tommy and made him cut me off. So fast forward a year, he has a new best friend, right? I get a DM from her on Instagram saying like, "Hey, did Tommy used to be your best friend?" Pretty much everybody knew what happened between me and Tommy. But she was like, "That girl that you're best friends with is dating him now." And then he completely cut me off. So technically, she used both her and I to get with Tommy. But after dating for literally like 2 months, he cheated on her because she slept with 5 other guys.
Am I an asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just to keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 5 years. Granted, we did break up throughout those 5 years. With all the breakups, we've actually been together for about 3 years. I've never considered myself an obsessive person, but when it comes to him, something just takes over me. Here's some of the reasons why we broke up. At first, he didn't want to be in a relationship even though I begged him, which I know was so dumb of me. So he eventually broke up with me and told me that he didn't want anything serious. But he kept on calling me every single week because he wanted the dirty. Instead, I started going out on other dates and I would flaunt it all over my social media. And this worked. It made him super jealous and he came right back to me. Called me up one day and told me that he wanted me back. The second time we broke up, I caught him talking to some girls on Facebook. When I confronted him, he broke up with me. Told me I was too nosy and that he needed to live his life as a single man. We finally got back together. I told him that it was for marriage. He said yes, that he would eventually ask me to marry him. A few months ago, he started acting really cold towards me. He would barely call me, and when we were together, he would never touch me. That's when I started digging in his phone and I found that he was talking to some girls on Instagram. But I knew that if I confronted him, I would risk him breaking up with me again. So I did the next logical thing. I waited until I saw him again and I told him that I was pregnant. I even started to cry to make him feel like I was happy. His face turned completely white and he asked me if I was sure. He said, yes, aren't you happy, baby? Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just so that I could keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. That's when he started to cry. Remember, I don't even have a pregnancy test to show or anything. But surprisingly, he didn't ask for proof of my pregnancy. He just kept crying on the couch. I asked him if he was happy, but clearly he was not. But he lied and said, yeah, of course I'm happy. Seeing how vulnerable he was, I took advantage of the situation and I brought up marriage. I told him we should get engaged soon so that we could tell his family. Then he said, are you sure you want to get married? And I said, of course, we're gonna have a baby. Then he sat there for a minute and thought about it. Finally, he got down on one knee and said, do you want to marry me? I said yes! And this time I cried for real. All my dreams were coming true. After that, things started moving really fast. We invited both our families to my apartment and we hosted a dinner. We broke the news to them that I was pregnant. Again, nobody asked for proof of the pregnancy though. Our families were so happy and excited. That very same night, he gave me a beautiful engagement ring. His mom even started planning the baby shower. Let me remind you, I'm actually not pregnant. So I had to come up with a plan. You'll never guess what I did. Part 3 is, am I an asshole for lying to my boyfriend about being pregnant just to keep him in a relationship? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent me on Instagram. His mom started planning the baby shower and there was no turning back. Even my mom got involved in the planning of the baby shower. So like I said, I'm really not pregnant at this point. So I started trying to get pregnant, but my damn boyfriend just wouldn't touch me. I decided to check his phone again and saw that he was still talking to some girls on Instagram. So I decided to confront him at this point. I mean, we are engaged and I'm supposedly pregnant with his baby. I confronted him and he just got angry at me. He said that if he was gonna marry me and have a baby with me, he would need to talk to other girls and that was not a negotiation for him. Then he confessed that he was seeing 2 other girls on the side and that there was no way he was gonna stop seeing them and that I couldn't do anything about it. But his confession actually made me fall out of love with him. Now I'm planning to break up with him. But what do I do about the fake pregnancy? I do want to make him pay for what he said to me, but I don't want to hurt our families either. Should I just come clean? What should I do?
Am I the asshole for telling my husband I don't want to give our child his last name? My husband and I have been friends since middle school, dating since junior year of high school, and we got married as soon as I graduated college. We've been married for 2 years now, and we just found out I'm pregnant with our first child. When we got married, I hyphenated our last names, with my last name being first, because I believe marriage is a union, and taking his last name felt like him claiming ownership over me. My husband was frustrated with this decision, but I stood my ground and was not going to budge. He eventually accepted this, but he did not hyphenate his last name. This bothered me for reasons I can't explain, but I never brought it up as something I had a problem with because I honestly understand. Now I'm pregnant and I wanted to tell him now, while we still have 8 months to discuss it, that I want to hyphenate our child's last name. He blew up on me, telling me how I'm being ridiculous and I can't actually expect him to be okay with that, and he just won't stand for it. I told him I want our child to have our last names. He told me it wasn't his last name, it was mine. I told him that he is the ridiculous one for not realizing how silly he sounded by saying my hyphenated last name wasn't also his name. Side note, before we even got married, he told me he wanted his hypothetical son to have his first name. I agreed, with some reluctancy if I'm being honest, but I love my husband and I love his name. I brought this fact up to him. If we had a son, my husband wants him to have his first and last name, and even if we have a daughter, she'll still have his last name. I told him that it wasn't fair. I even told him we could put his last name first when we hyphenate, but he was not having it. I went on to say that my sister has constant problems because her son doesn't have her last name, even though the father has never been in my nephew's life. She gets questioned by doctors and teachers if she's really his mom, and since she's gotten married, she even has problems with getting him under her husband's TRICARE. I told him if we ever separated, I don't want those problems. Then he blew up on me again for assuming we would separate, and that's when I finally snapped and told him he was being a stubborn, self-centered man-child. He knew that wasn't what I meant and he was being extremely obtuse. He left to cool down, and now I'm getting texts from my mother-in-law saying that I was being unreasonable and manipulative and had to reduce the insults to throw a fit to get what I want, even though I didn't get what I wanted. I can understand he wants his child to have his last name, but I feel like hyphenating it is still giving the child his last name. So, am I the asshole? See, I think, honestly, this is a discussion that you should have had prior to marriage if you were really so passionate about it. Like, yo, by the way, our kid's gonna have both our last names. I don't think it's a fucking big deal. Like, honestly, what I plan to do, inshallah, I don't know, is that I would have the kid's first name, my last name as their middle name, and then my husband's last name. It's just a name to me, but to each their own. Am I the asshole for telling my husband I don't want to give our child his last name? My husband and I have been friends since middle school, dating since junior year of high school, and we got married as soon as I graduated college. We've been married for 2 years now, and we just found out I'm pregnant with our first child. When we got married, I hyphenated our last names, with my last name being first, because I believe marriage is a union, and taking his last name felt like him claiming ownership over me. My husband was frustrated with this decision, but I stood my ground and was not going to budge. He eventually accepted this, but he did not hyphenate his last name. This bothered me for reasons I can't explain, but I never brought it up as something I had a problem with because I honestly understand. Now I'm pregnant and I wanted to tell him now, while we still have 8 months to discuss it, that I want to hyphenate our child's last name. He blew up on me, telling me how I'm being ridiculous and that I can't actually expect him to be okay with that, and he just won't stand for it. I told him I want our child to have our last names. He told me it wasn't his last name, it was mine. I told him that he is the ridiculous one for not realizing how silly he sounded by saying my hyphenated last name wasn't also his name. Side note, before we even got married, he told me he wanted his hypothetical son to have his first name. I agreed, with some reluctancy if I'm being honest, but I love my husband and I love his name. I brought this fact up to him. If we had a son, my husband wants him to have his first and last name, and even if we have a daughter, she'll still have his last name. I told him that it wasn't fair. I even told him we could put his last name first when we hyphenate, but he was not having it. I went on to say that my sister has constant problems because her son doesn't have her last name, even though the father has never been in my nephew's life. She gets questioned by doctors and teachers if she's really his mom, and since she's gotten married, she even has problems with getting him under her husband's TRICARE. I told him if we ever separated, I don't want those problems. Then he blew up on me again for assuming we would separate, and that's when I finally snapped and told him he was being a stubborn, self-centered man-child. He knew that wasn't what I meant, and he was being extremely obtuse. He left to cool down, and now I'm getting texts from my mother-in-law saying that I was being unreasonable and manipulative and had to reduce the insults to throw a fit to get what I want, even though I didn't get what I wanted. I can understand he wants his child to have his last name, but I feel like hyphenating it is still giving the child his last name. So, am I the asshole? See, I think, honestly, this is a discussion that you should have had prior to marriage if you were really so passionate about it. Like, yo, by the way, our kid's gonna have both our last name. I don't think it's a fucking big deal. Like, honestly, what I plan to do, inshallah, I don't know, is that I would have the kid's first name, my last name as their middle name, and then my husband's last name. It's just a name to me, but to each their own. Am I the asshole for kicking my sister-in-law out after she threw away most of my single-use baby products and even formula? I, 19 female, have a 3-week-old baby girl. I do still live with my parents, but since I pay rent equally, they say I can have just as much of a say of who comes in and who comes from the house as they do. I've never actually taken advantage of this rule until recently though. I have a brother who's 26 and his wife is 24. They're crunchy parents to an 8-month-old. Basically what that is fucking stupid. They use reusable wipes, nappies, think formula is the epitome of evil, baby wearing, and the list goes on. I'm the complete opposite. Pacifiers, supplementing with formula due to low supply, disposable wipes, and nappies. They are completely against the products I use and often give me things like my sister-in-law's breast milk in bags, disposable nappies their loved one has grown out of, etc. I've used some, but it's not really my cup of tea. On Monday night, my brother and sister-in-law were minding my baby for me since it was my birthday, and my baby's father, not together, very close friends and co-parents, took me to get some dinner in one of my favorite fast food places. When I got home that evening, my sister-in-law said that she did some cleaning and threw out anything I don't need. This immediately gave me red flags, but they were in a hurry to get out the door and left almost immediately. When I went into the nursery, every disposable nappy and wipe pack was gone and replaced with some reusable cloth ones. Same with my formula. There was 8 tubs of it and all of it was gone. I'm not able to replace them at the moment, and solely breastfeeding isn't sustainable for us. I was extremely angry and I just turned my phone off to avoid being mean to my sister-in-law. She and my brother came over yesterday to collect something they forgot, and that was when I confronted her. I told her she has to replace everything she dumped. When she said she can't afford to, I said fine, just get out and don't come back until I've been reimbursed or everything is replaced with the original items. My brother thinks I'm being a massive asshole and he's on his wife's side. Of fucking course. Our parents think I'm being completely reasonable here, but they think telling her essentially not to come back is taking it too far. So, am I the asshole?
I'm 30, my boyfriend 31, have been dating for 6 months. We met through a mutual friend and things went from there. We do not live together. We do, however, spend enough time but more outside. A week ago, while we were out with friends, my boyfriend asked if I could make a copy of the key to my apartment. For a little bit of context, I own an apartment while he rents with his friends, and let him have it. I was puzzled and asked why. He said he might need to stop by alone or with some friends when I'm at work or somewhere. To be honest, I just did not feel like it was a good idea. I asked what business does he have in my apartment when I'm out, and he took offense to that. A few seconds of awkward silence later, then I told him that I don't feel comfortable having anyone at my apartment unless I'm there, and that he gets to have a copy of the key only if he lives there and that's it. He got quiet for the rest of the evening, but after we left, he sent a long wall of text basically criticizing what I had said to him and talking about how I don't trust him. I said that I just didn't think he should have a copy unless he's living with me, and he took it as in I was pushing him to move in. But as far as I know, he lives with a bunch of guys paying rent, so not the best living arrangement, and he constantly complains. We had an argument and he insisted that I have no trust in him, that I embarrassed him in front of his friends by declining to let him have a copy of the key. He then hung up and kept sulking. I tried calling him again, but one of his friends picked up and got involved, saying my boyfriend is rightfully upset with me for not treating him like my partner and showing him the respect that he deserves. He said me refusing to give him a copy of the key means 1, I don't trust him or his friends, and 2, I think he's a thief and can't be trusted with my belongings. It got overwhelming, and I started to think that I flew off the handle and was unfair to him by flat out refusing and then not explaining my point. Am I the asshole for not letting my boyfriend have a copy of the key to my apartment? I'm 26 and my husband is 31. I was planning on having a girls' night at home and he initially was like, no, not here, get a hotel or something. I said I couldn't afford a hotel, plus there was no need for one. He asked if he could join us if he's going to allow it, but I said no, this isn't how girls' night works. He eventually agreed to let me have it and even said he'd go out so my friends could be more comfortable. I invited the girls over and most of them had a lot of heavy venting to do. At some point things got a bit emotionally charged and there was crying, lots of it. After we brought in the food and drinks, when I went to turn on the TV, I spotted a small device tucked on the side. I took a look and found that it was actually a voice recording device. I was in disbelief. I knew my husband put it there to listen to our private conversations, which felt highly violating. I didn't hide it from the girls. I showed them the device, called my husband to get him to come home, and confronted him right there in front of the girls. The girls were shocked and my husband denied it after I flipped out and called him out. Then he said he was feeling curious to know about what we were talking about and wanted to make sure we weren't trash talking him specifically. The event was cut short and the girls left. I kept lashing out at him for ruining the night and possibly my relationship and trust with my friends. I said not only did he violate my privacy, but my friends as well, because they were talking about very personal stuff. He argued that it was no big deal, that I should have just let him join us if we had nothing to hide, and that this was on them for opening up about private matters to begin with. He went on to talk about how I humiliated him by calling him out in front of my friends. I told him they deserve to know who he really is after what he's done. We argued some more and then he went out again. We're still fighting till today and I feel like I made a mistake calling him out like that aside from how I felt about it. He claims that my friends will no longer respect him after that. Am I the asshole for calling my husband out in front of my friends for planning a recording device while we were having a girls' night in?
My husband asked for a maternity test. So I gave birth to our daughter 2 weeks ago. I have red hair and blue eyes, and my husband has blonde hair and blue eyes. Our daughter has greyish brown eyes and a tuft of dark brown hair, and is a bit darker than my husband or I. Both of my parents have very dark brown hair and brown eyes, as does the rest of my family. My mum's parents are from Sicily, and my dad immigrated from Greece, so we're on the darker side of white people. But I got the genetic mutation of red hair. This is only relevant because my husband apparently does not understand genetics. Now, to make this perfectly clear, I did not cheat on my husband. He is convinced that it is not his baby because of how much darker her complexion is. To ease his mind, I said I wouldn't be offended if he wanted a paternity test, as I've got nothing to hide. But then he started insisting that I should have to get a maternity test as well. Yeah. In his words, he doesn't even trust me enough to trust that I'm the mother. I'm very confused. I tried to explain to him several times that he was there throughout all 38 weeks of pregnancy. He watched me go from no bump to being very obviously pregnant. I asked him if he thought that I had gotten someone else's eggs put into me, and he just shrugged. I'm at a loss. I've been trying to explain genetics and why I don't need a maternity test to prove that it's my child for 2 weeks now. I just legitimately do not know how to get through to him. Even his mum tried to explain it. He is usually very smart. He's a software engineer. He has a master's degree and is planning on going back to school for his PhD. I swear that he isn't usually this dumb. I just do not know what to do. Please help me. I'm at a loss. I seriously don't know what to do. Can I even get a maternity test done? Do they do those? And now in the comments, I mean, if the paternity test comes back not his, then go ahead and get the maternity test. But otherwise, if the paternity test says it's his kid, ask him who else is he sleeping with that could be the mum. That ought to shut him up quickly. And OP replies, savage. Works for me. How can you look at him with a straight face again? Seriously. It's bad for your infant to be around such ignorance. Could he have someone even dumber advising him, like his mother or sister? This is emotional abuse, and completely ridiculous. You can get a DNA test, and they tell you for certain if your child was switched at birth. It is a thing. OP says, I might just get it done at this point. At 2 weeks, your baby's eyes and hair aren't even their permanent color. And OP says, I tried telling him that. Stop trying to reason with him. He doesn't want to be reasoned with. He is looking for something, anything to confirm his fear and suspicion, and will take any discussion as you trying to convince him he is wrong. In the US, you can buy a DNA test at any pharmacy now. I just do it, then whack him over the head with the results, lol. I know how you feel though. I got a DNA test done on my middle son because my ex swore that he couldn't be his because he didn't look like either of us. My son is just a throwback. He looks just like my great-grandfather. Exactly. Sometimes that happens. Could he be having some sort of mental health crisis due to the stress of becoming a parent? This is really concerning. And OP says, I didn't even think of that. I'll ask his mum to talk to him and see if he's struggling. He's being a little weird with me right now. Men can suffer from PPD as well, and sleep deprivation is a doozy. Can you guys get some help for a few days? Infants' eyes are usually blue and grey to begin and change over time. My baby was born with brown hair and blue eyes, and now she has blonde hair and green eyes. Newborns change so much in the first few months. And now on to the update. Long story short, my husband isn't stupid, he was just having a mental breakdown. I guess the stress of being a new father just kind of got to him. He didn't think or want to acknowledge that the baby was ours. He had his first therapy session for this yesterday, and hopefully that will help. Having a baby is obviously a really big change. Our sleep schedules are both messed up. Postpartum depression in men is a bigger issue than many people realize. I'm doing my best to provide him with a good support system while taking care of a newborn. I think he'll be okay in due time. But for everyone wondering, to sum it up, he is not dumb and he is not cheating on me, he is just going through a hard time right now. And now in the comments, in all the years watching Maury Povich, I've never heard of a maternity test. Does he think your baby was switched at birth? That you lost a baby and stole one from someone? Got someone else's eggs put inside of you? And OP replies, yeah, it was definitely a strange request. He was there when the baby came out. I just hope you have a good support system. Looking after a newborn is hard enough without having to look after a grown man in the process. Seriously, huge props to you and your doctors for validating your husband's PPD. Its existence is almost completely ignored in any new parent that isn't a birth-giving biological mother. Good luck with the new kiddo. Wow, so he wasn't an idiot. He was just mentally screwed up for a bit. Huh. I've been humiliatingly irrational in my past before too. I wasn't expecting to feel for the guy after reading this update. Anyway, I hope everything is going alright, and also, congrats on the baby. I worked with a woman who was given the wrong baby back in the 80s. She was adamant that the baby wasn't hers, and the nurses just kept telling her that she was tired and needed to sleep, and she was yelling back, "This is not my baby! Mine was uglier and had a weird head. Where is my baby?" They left to go get her meds to calm her down, and next thing, a doctor and 2 nurses came into the room holding a baby, and they asked, "How is the baby's head weird?" She told them, and they handed her the baby. She didn't know how many babies got swapped in that kerfuffle, but she knows she got hers back. He needed a helmet to straighten his head out in the end too. This is why they tag the baby and the mother before they leave the delivery room now. Mum has a wristband that matches the ankle band on the baby. I actually joked about needing a maternity test as, when mine came out, she was literally the spitting image of her father with no resemblance of me at all. A decade on, she has my coloring, but still 100% her father's features. Fortunately, in a more feminine version. Glad to read this guy got help, because to be serious about this is a whole other issue.
The most beautiful diamond. You've got the most beautiful diamond. You've got the most beautiful diamond eyes I've ever seen in my whole life.
I, 17 male, cannot get my parents, 45 male, 44 female, to listen to me regarding my sister's, 6 females, educational needs. Okay, so I'm currently in my second year of college. Child genius, got fast-tracked through grades, and I have 2 younger sisters, Jess and Anna. Anna was born fully deaf and is starting elementary school this year. I'm not trying to throw my parents into a negative light. They do love us, they've provided us with every opportunity possible, and we have wanted for nothing growing up. Even though my parents were thrown when they found out Anna was deaf, they are musicians by trade, and both me and Jess have been involved with music from a young age. They learned ASL along with me and my sister, and tried their hardest to adapt. That said, I've always been closest with Anna as she's grown up, and she's like my best friend. She's always come with me if she's afraid or sick. She looks to me for interpretation or context when we're out, and she's always been my little shadow. So, out of everyone in our family, I feel like I know her the best. My parents are sending Anna to a private special needs school in the coming year, and I personally disagree with their choice. I looked into the place, took a virtual tour, and from everything I've seen and read, it seems to be catered more to students with severe mental disabilities or mobility impaired. In fact, I couldn't see a great deal about the services provided for deaf students at all. I brought this up to my parents, but they just brushed me off, saying it was what was best and they would take care of her. I asked why she can't go to a mainstream school, but they said there were no services for her. Well, I did a bunch of research. I contacted district superintendents, local council, even schools directly themselves. I even found a deaf school, only very slightly out of boundary, who said they were willing to be flexible. When I brought this to my parents, they got annoyed, saying that they knew what was best for their daughter and I should stay out of it, and that no school would be able to handle her hearing impairment and behavioral problems. I was stunned. Anna doesn't have behavioral problems. She's a bit willful, sure. She has a mind of her own, and she's always had a mischievous streak, but she's never acted out of control. She can read and write above average for her age. I know because I read with her, and while she's a little slow on the math front, I doubt it's any real cause for concern. I asked if she'd been diagnosed, and they cited the times she's wandered off during trips to the theater or made noises during the performance. They haven't seen a doctor or any professional about this. They just saw a deaf child being forced to sit still for hours, not understanding everything that's going on around her, and acting out of boredom and frustration, and decided that she's got behavioral issues. Anna is a bright kid, and while the school they've picked out looks amazing for kids with disabilities, I just don't think it would suit her specifically. But despite all my arguments, and despite me spending more time with Anna than either of them combined, they still tell me to shut up and not get involved with their decisions because they are the adults, which really annoys me because I've been forced to act like an adult my whole life. But as soon as I want to say on something actually important, they shut me down and potentially take away my sister's potential to thrive. And now in the comments, it sounds like trying to rationally convince your parents of your position has not worked for you. I think you have two approaches you can take going forward. First, you could find someone else who your parents will listen to. Could you get someone from the school for disabilities to speak with your parents honestly? Perhaps a teacher, or the parent of another student, or a doctor? Alternatively, do you know any other families with a deaf child, or deaf families, who could speak to the importance of a specialized education? Second, you could start your conversation with your parents not with an argument, but with a genuine listening ear. It sounds like they're exhausted and frustrated, and this might be impacting their decisions. Ask them how they are feeling. Say you just want to understand their decision, you don't want to fight about it, and then actually try to understand it. This might take a few conversations for them to let their guard down, but if they seem receptive to hearing your feelings, tell them what you said here. I feel like I've been made to be an adult since I was so young, but now when I want to be a part of the adult decision-making in this family, you are shutting me out, and that makes me feel frustrated and angry. I also feel defensive of my sister. I want the best possible education for her, where she feels affirmed and supported, and can communicate with the people around her. Can you understand those feelings? When someone is making a bad decision, empathy can go a lot farther than arguments. This goes for them too. If you just ask for them to understand your feelings, they might be more willing to hear you out than if you ask them to admit that they were wrong and transfer your sister to the other school. You may also have to play the long game here ultimately. If your parents remain steadfast in their choice, you may have to let your sister go to this school for a year. Take note of how her behavior changes, whether she likes the school, whether she makes friends, or has any other deaf children to play with, and so on and so forth. She can always transfer out, and your parents may be more willing to try the other school if they see that this one has a negative impact on her. And OP replies, "Thanks for this. I think the main issue is that my mum and dad just learned ASL and assumed the issues raising a deaf child ended there. Anna has actually never met another deaf person before, let alone another family, and we don't have any hearing impaired relatives. They have a very heavy focus on raising her normally and see any challenges as defects in her rather than her own limitations. I might try and reach out to local groups in my area for advice on this, but due to COVID and resistance from my parents, this might be difficult. I think another issue in discussing this stems from the fact that their parenting has always been very hands-off, emotionally speaking. So if and when Anna gets into trouble, they don't really take the time to understand why she's doing what she's doing. They don't know a great deal about deaf culture or how deaf people might see or interact with the world. I'm aware that I might seem like a know-it-all or a brat, and I really don't mean to be critical of my parents. I just wish they'd be a bit more flexible in their thinking, especially when it comes to Anna. They don't like to admit they don't know everything, and I often worry this is going to affect her more harshly as she grows up. Maybe bring up the possibility of an evaluation by a pediatric occupational therapist. They are trained professionals to evaluate a child's occupational profile and whether she's ready for school and which type of school would be the best for her, taking her resources and barriers into consideration. And maybe instead of arguing with a "I know this is best" approach, which your parents have obviously already disregarded, try to understand their reasoning for choosing said school. Because in your post, you haven't mentioned why they want to send her to a special needs school, only that they want to do it. It may come across differently when they speak to a professional. Dad to a deaf daughter here, based solely on what you have written, it sounds like the deaf school would be a good compromise. Caters specifically to deaf needs while not simply being a special needs school. I know my daughter gets a lot of reassurance and benefit from interacting with both hearing and deaf people, so you should at least try to convince/facilitate that, separate from any schooling situation. And back up to the post, we have an edit. Sort of an update, but not really. I just wanted to clarify a few recurring points that have arisen throughout both comments and PMs. 1. I mentioned the skipping grades thing because I thought it would explain why I was a 17-year-old sophomore in college and why I felt like I was qualified to intervene with the decision-making process. I've been involved in adult conversations and have been surrounded by adults who regard and treat me as a peer for most of my life. I apologize if I was unclear. 2. Someone mentioned that my parents would recognize behavioral issues in Anna because they have raised 2 children before her. I would disagree with this as 1, every child is different. Jess and I have very different temperaments and personalities, same as Anna. And 2, my parents have raised 2 hearing children who are regarded as intelligent and mature for their age. Seeing a deaf 6-year-old acting like a 6-year-old, I would argue, is relatively new to them. 3. I have actually gotten involved with a local deaf advocacy group for deaf and hard of hearing adults and their friends and families. We are having a meeting via Zoom on Monday night, and I'm looking forward to getting their insight. 4. On a slightly more serious note, some of you have expressed concern about my mum and dad's parenting and that I'm being parentified, that they are ableist, that I'm too young to have these concerns regardless of my intelligence or maturity. I've thought on this a lot, and on some level, I think you might be right. My parents don't like to be told that they are wrong or made to feel like they don't know something, and I don't believe they have adapted to Anna's hearing impairments as well as they believe, and on some level, think it reflects badly on them. Admittedly, I can see some of their flaws reflected in me, and I'm trying to work on that. I do wonder if one of the reasons Anna is so attached to me is because I do give her affection and attention where our parents aren't as forthcoming. Regardless of whether I'm too young, there is a little girl that needs someone to rely on, and if that's me, then I'll take up that mantle. I love my sister, and I want to strive to make the world better for her. And 5, I'm going to try a more subtle approach to this, rather than treating it like a debate with my parents, still working on those flaws. If anything comes of it, I'll be sure to update you. Thank you for all your comments and advice. It's been great to hear from so many people. And now on to the update. Hi everyone. About 98% of you were super wonderful on my last post and seemed genuinely invested, so I thought I'd give you all an update. It's been just under a week now, and after trying some of the different tactics and talking points that you suggested, in addition to reaching out to the deaf and hard of hearing community, my parents and I have come to a compromise, if only to shut me up. But I'm not the only one that's important here. That would be Anna, 6 female. So come the new school year, Anna will be going to the school my parents chose, but we, including me, will be keeping in close contact with her teachers, specialists, etc., her progress, and talking to Anna herself about how she feels. If it seems like it isn't a great fit, we will be transferring her to the deaf school. It's a little out of the area, but I think we can make it work. I did open up to my parents a bit, as much as they could handle, and told them that I feel like I've been, not robbed, but had a stunted childhood, and that my academic abilities forced me to grow up quickly. That, coupled with their emotional distance and lack of physical presence with Anna, made me angry and frustrated that my opinions on her future weren't being taken into account. I wish I could say that was what did it, but honestly, my points about the school not teaching Anna independence and other arguments brought up on the original post probably eased them over to my side a bit. I kept my temper even this time. I mentioned in my edit on the last post that I'd gotten in contact with a deaf advocacy group, and they've provided some wonderful resources, so hopefully sometime soon, Anna will finally be able to meet kids and adults like her. She is super excited by this. She is the least reserved and most outgoing sibling out of us 3, so I have no doubt she'll make friends quickly. I've also made the decision to start seeing a therapist to maybe work on some of the issues that I've been reflecting on and to get some emotional support where my mum and dad drop the ball. I don't see them changing or even admitting they need to change anytime soon, but that doesn't mean I have to stay complacent. That's more or less the main chunk of what I wanted to say. I noticed the rules say that we aren't allowed to upload images, so I'll just describe the drawing Anna gave me to pin up on my office wall. She's a brilliant little artist. I'm not even biased. An ocean surface. A large boat approaches from the left-hand side, full of garbage. A great blue whale stands, mid-breach, opposing, brandishing a gun in one flipper. A speech bubble from the whale reads, "No!" while the ambiguously gendered humans on the garbage boat scream in terror, presumably ready to flee. Her kindergarten assignment was to come up with a way that we can protect our oceans from pollution, and personally, I think she hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much to everyone for your thoughts and feedback. And now in the comments, you fought for her. That's amazing. I know we're strangers, but I was 17 years old once, and I know how hard it can be to stand up to the adults in your life at that age. So I'm really proud of you, and I'm glad your sister has you in her life. You did a good thing. And tell her that drawing is awesome. You're an amazing brother, and I commend you for standing up for your sister's education. I have a degree in American Sign Language and deaf culture, and I know how isolating it can be for deaf children who are forced to mainstream into programs that don't cater to their specific needs. I'm so glad that you had a deaf and hard of hearing advocacy group reach out so they can help your parents make informed decisions on what is best for your sister. Good job. I am severely hearing impaired, have been since childhood, along with my brother. I was raised in the hearing world and have always had to accommodate the world. Never had any idea the world should maybe try to understand me, and I want to applaud you for standing up for your sister. If you aren't hearing impaired or deaf, it's very hard to understand how casually you're excluded from things with impatience or thoughts that you aren't very bright. Putting your sister with a group of people with the same impairment is going to grow her confidence by leaps and bounds. Kudos to you for being a wonderful big brother. And OP responds, I know I can never fully understand what it's like, but luckily, Anna is excellent at making her thoughts and feelings known, and I can't wait for her to start meeting people like her. I really wish that this had a happier ending. Yeah, the parents had no intention of ever admitting they could be wrong and ever let Anna transfer out of the school that they chose. That said, I really hope the brother doesn't give up and keeps advocating for her. Props to him for working on what he can. As the older brother of a deaf sister, this post is heartbreaking. Layers upon layers of sadness, hoping that this story ends up with what is best for Anna, but God. Based on what I've seen, that is not often the case. I hope OP stays connected not only with therapists, but also with the larger deaf community. And edit, just to be clear, my experience is different from OP. My sister is only a bit younger, and she went to local schools, even though they sucked. She was always strongly supported by my parents and myself, and she actually went on to get a doctorate, and she's a total badass. The thing to remember is, deafness is not necessarily a handicap.
Am I the asshole for having a trashy piercing while pregnant? I'm having my first baby soon and my OBGYN is on vacation. I had a question and figured I would just ask the on-call doctor. When I got to the clinic for my checkup, the nurse came in and after the usual, I asked if I could talk to the on-call doctor. She said they're running behind and might not be able to see me today, so asked me what the problem was. I asked what I should do about my piercing down there that I've had for 6+ years. She rolled her eyes and told me that she wasn't getting the on-call doctor to ask about that and I need to figure it out. I said I really wanted his take on it and I needed her to ask or let me talk to him. Am I the asshole for having a trashy piercing while pregnant? She went on the computer for a minute and typed a bit, then said I need to just take it out and that's what the clinic protocol said. I then asked her if I could put a retainer in it to keep it safe to replace after birth. She told me I should take the opportunity to let go of trashy piercings and leave it since I was becoming a mom. I was shocked. When I told my friends about it, most of them were shocked too, but another friend who's studying to be a nurse said it was rude. She said I made her uncomfortable and it'd be rude of me to report her because it's not her job to listen to unsolicited information about kinky stuff. Also that I violated her consent in the conversation. Am I the asshole for ordering delivery food when I only live a few blocks away from the restaurant? There's a local burger joint that me and my family love and it's about 10 blocks away from our house. I'm a full-time student and a stay-at-home mother to a toddler while my husband works full-time. I had a big exam and a couple of lab practicals due today and was too tired to cook. So I decided to order from the joint. It was already really dark and really cold and mind you we didn't have a car so I ordered delivery. Mind you, there was an additional fee and I paid online and left a $20 tip. 30 minutes later, I went to pick up my food and when I got to the door, the delivery person was very rude to me. Am I the asshole for ordering delivery food when I only live a few blocks away from the restaurant? The delivery person was very rude and told me that next time I should get off my ass and pick up my own damn food. She said she doesn't get paid enough to deliver food less than a mile and I grabbed my food and didn't say a word. I headed back towards the elevator and heard a pound on the locked door. I turned around to see that she'd hit the door with some snow and was flipping me off. I went upstairs kind of frazzled and ended up calling the restaurant to let them know what happened and to please reimburse me for my tip. The manager was horrified and apologized and ended up returning my tip. He also offered me a coupon for my next visit, but am I the asshole for ordering?